Star Wars Outlaws. Some people are very excited for it. Some people are like dead on arrival. I still am up in the air. What I've played, I've really enjoyed of the game, but I do understand that some people are suspicious, and I think that that's totally reasonable. I am in a rare situation where I've played the game, and I think what they've shown is pretty good. There's a couple of little bitty things here and there, like for one, like platforming. They have a couple of sections where you climb on stuff. That's always really clunky. They have other little bitty things here and there. But in general, I think the game is pretty damn impressive in a lot of ways. But IGN first just dropped a video showcasing the open world elements of the game. So let's see what this is.
Making open world games is really, really tough. And making Star Wars open world games is the next level of difficulty.
Julian Garrity, creative director at Massive Entertainment, is up for a challenge. For the first time ever, we're getting a fully open-world Star Wars video game. It's been a long time coming, but after back-to-back successes with both The Division and The Division 2, Garrity was in the mood to take a risk.
This may be just my approach, but even if it's scary, you've got to do it. You've got to lean into it. What's the downside to pitching a Star Wars game at Lucasfilm Games in George Lucas's old office? I mean, what's the downside to that? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you still have that experience.
Fast forward several years after that meeting, and Massive Entertainment is less than 2 months away from releasing Star Wars Outlaws, a fully realized version of the original pitch described in that office. An open world of dual ambitions, maintain the cinematic legacy of the films, and create immersive scoundrel gameplay that grants you the freedom of the galaxy.
I think it's taken this long to get an open world Star Wars game because of how, excuse the pun, massive it is to build a game like this. There are only so many studios in the world who build games of this scale. The door is then open for Massive to come to us and say, this is what we're interested in doing. This is the type of game design and gameplay we want. This is what we're thinking about in terms of an archetype. Where does that fit?
It's the outlaw player fantasy, and it's open world. Those were the two main pillars that we pitched. Why open?
So they keep doubling down on the open world, which obviously is the title of this thing. But in all the previews that have happened so far that I'm aware of, they've not really done a lot of deep diving into how the open world side of things works. It's like very, like you've heard the comparisons. People are like, oh, it feels like Uncharted. You know, it feels like Uncharted mixed with Jedi Survivor, which, like, those are both very good games. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. But those I would not classify as open world games. Even like a Jedi Survivor where you can travel to different places. When I hear open world, I just have different expectations, which is why it's so interesting that they keep framing this as open world Star Wars game. Maybe it's just because that's like an easy way to make this game more unique, at least in the pitch, but I'm not really sure. Because most of what we've seen so far is just more linear sequences, which again are not bad, but not really like doubling down on the open world side of things.
Because the outlaw fantasy really needs that to live and breathe.
It's a combination of, I think, our DNA as a studio, our background, when we think, okay, what do we have a lot of experience doing? What do we think we're good at? And this fantasy, the scoundrel in Star Wars, begs for freedom.
Massive was fully confident in its abilities to create engaging open worlds. The Division offered a bullet-filled action playground, while last year's Avatar Frontiers of Pandora displayed an ability to work well within a Disney license by building a near-unmatched visual paradise.
But do bear in mind that apparently they've already said after this they're moving on to The Division 3. So even if this game is a wild success, it seems like they are a little burnt out on working with Disney. I don't know why. Maybe they do just want to return to The Division and they're like, yeah, we did this. Maybe we'll return to it in a decade or something. But they are not doing another like Avatar game. They're not doing another Star Wars game right after this. They're going back to Division.
Star Wars was the new challenge that this team yearned for. Of course, deciding what kind of experience would live inside a Star Wars open world was the first thing that had to be decided.
We took a step back, of course, and thought, okay, Star Wars open world, what an opportunity. What does that naturally want to be? And it wants to be the full scale from the very small to the very big, meaning sitting inside a cantina, playing sabacc, being able to walk through the street, jump on your speeder, drive across the planet's surface, park literally your bike in your own ship, take off into space seamlessly.
That vision of full scale helped secure a green light from Star Wars custodians, but getting Lucasfilm's blessing was just the key in the ignition. Translating the cinematic spectacle of the original Star Wars movie trilogy into an open world, set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, two of the most iconic films of all time, was the actual challenge. One that Massive set out to address in every aspect of Outlaws, from the way it looks and sounds to the type of action-adventure gameplay it supplies.
Fire up the hyperdrive.
The sort of cinematic ambition that we had was in presentation. So that doesn't mean cinematics necessarily. What I care the most about is the interactive part, right? What we did was take a lot of inspiration from the original trilogy, but with today's technology. So very similar to what Rogue One did. What its aim was to do was to replicate a lot of the sort of filmic effects of those lenses of the 1970s. So you'll see barrel distortion on the sides, vignetting, film grain, chromatic aberration, and of course, all wrapped up in an ultra widescreen presentation.
All wrapped up in an ultra widescreen presentation, which makes sense why now they've done all the trailers and stuff in this way. I believe what I played was 16:9. I'm pretty sure they had like cutscenes go to the 21:9, but I don't think it was always ultra widescreen.
Open world games at large, but I think very much for Star Wars as well, and not always scaling that it needs to be grand, but it needs to be conscious. The scale of Tatooine needs and should and does in our game feel very different. It breeds open sand dunes, long sight lines. You see, it's easy to pick up any little anomaly on the horizon. There might be an opportunity for you compared to the dense streets of Kijimi.
Scale is something written into the very DNA of Star Wars, whether seen on the big or small screen. Greg Fraser, Rogue One's director of photography, recently told IGN that
if you watch any Star Wars film, that's what it's all about. It's, knowing how big a human is going into this massive Millennium Falcon. You know how big the Millennium Falcon is going to this massive Death Star. Like, it's scale upon scale upon scale.
It's a philosophy Garrity and the team at Massive took into Outlaws when crafting the introduction to its open world.
One of our intentions was, for the beginning of the game, to make it feel very small and then bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So beginning of the game, you start off in one room and it's claustrophobic and it's meant to make you feel a little bit trapped. You open up and it's city streets, but it's contained. And then some narrative stuff and you steal a ship and you explode into the galaxy and all of a sudden you crash land on this planet, which is wide open world. That sort of sense of everything growing for you, and not just the scale of the galaxy, but the scale of the possibilities for you as a character, as a rookie outlaw.
K-Vest, the underworld's favorite new scoundrel.
Which I kind of love hearing about these like design decisions of how to frame a game's beginning, how to move forward, how to shift things forward. I love hearing about those intentional decisions because sometimes they work really well and other times they really don't. And it's like, why did you start the game that way? Like with Days Gone, we talked about that in a segment on Monday. And with that, it was a very conscious decision to start the game the way that they did, to kind of really ease into gaining the ability to fight hordes and stuff. And I totally understand all of that. But it's always a balancing act between what is like immersive thematically and what will make for the best video game. Because some people will love like, oh yeah, well, Deacon doesn't have the ability to fight the hordes, so it doesn't make sense to put the hordes in the first half of the game. I can understand that, but then there's also a lot of players who are like, I saw the hordes in the trailers. That's what I've wanted to really go after, and now I just can't. Like, I have to wait 20 hours of gameplay or 10 hours of game, whatever it was. And so sometimes there can be a very intentional choice that just doesn't work, and other times they do work. But I love hearing about those decisions and hearing why they made them.
Outlaws campaign tells the tale of K-Vest, a young scoundrel looking to build a team from across the stars in order to pull off one big space heist and remove the death mark placed on her by the Zerek Besh crime syndicate. It's the basis of a story that evokes many other adventures from across both games and film.
I love Mass Effect 2. It was one of my favorite games. I think there were so many influences, everything from Ocean's 11, Ocean's 8, to Star Wars itself, the previous films. Like, that heist feeling was always kind of in the fabric, to just tonally the films of Kurosawa, those original influences to George Lucas.
Knowing what sort of story you want to tell is one thing. Telling an engaging story in an open world setting is another task altogether, and one that Kavari is well aware of, having written for Far Cry 4, 5, and 6, as well as The Division.
One of the things you always have to keep in mind is how are we going to weave a narrative and an open world together so that we're telling the story, but also giving you the freedom to sort of go wherever you like. We had a really clear approach on Outlaws, which was, there was Kay's journey. We called them sort of lighthouses. There were key points that we knew we want her to hit these, and then that makes her story kind of part of the wider Star Wars narrative. But between those moments, we knew early on that if you got distracted by curiosity, the world had to react to that. It had to expect that the player's going to go off the beaten path.
The things that lie off the beaten path are built in accordance to something Massive refers to as the 3-second rule, where within a few blinks of an eye, you can instantly understand the nature of a location or character and the story behind them.
Before you even put life in them, they need to visually tell a story about what kind of place it is, what happened in the past, what type of life and events have taken place in them. So they get that lived-in feeling, and that lived-in, relatable, substantial feel, I think, is a hallmark of any good open world, but also very Star Wars.
Star Wars aesthetic has always been rooted in the idea of the used future, where everything from the largest spaceships to the tiniest droids have that instantly recognizable layer of grime. Those small details build up into authentic, cool, and bespoke spaces, something Massive has always managed to build into its open worlds. The Division and its sequel are packed full of memorable levels ranging from New York landmarks to Washington, D.C. museums, and that philosophy is being transferred to Outlaws' many planets. Its main missions promise to take us to iconic locations such as Imperial bases and Jabba's palace.
We can lean into the virtual tourism aspect of, hey, what is the distance between the moisture farms and Mos Eisley and the cantina? There is a linear roller coaster story, golden path, if you will. And around that, of course, there's the open world.
That's the dream I know I had as a kid. That is what I've always wanted from a Star Wars game, is that, you know, when I'm on a journey, when I'm entering into a quest, it might start on foot. It might start navigating a High Republic cruiser that's crashed, but I want to be able to jump into my speeder and blast off, hop into the Trailblazer, take off into space, maybe land in a space station and meet some characters that factor into my quest or journey along the way. And so that sort of connective tissue of planet or moon to space was crucial, because that's kind of the fantasy that I think players are hoping for.
That fantasy and freedom is evidently at the core of Outlaws. And while all 5 planets and moons won't be instantly available to hyperdrive between, Garrity claims it won't be long into Kay's journey until the galaxy opens up.
There's a very structured intro that leads you to crash land on Toshara, which is a moon that we...
And I think that that's why I think all the preview events we've done are in those first few hours, as far as I can tell. So I fully expect that once we get our hands on the actual like full game, we'll have a much better idea of what is there and how it expands and how much content there really is. Because even like the bigger preview events, they focus mainly on the early stuff from what I understand. So it'll be interesting to see when we actually see the whole game open up. Now there are 5 planets / moons, to be clear. And some people have pointed to that and like thrown a fit about it. And I find that funny because like those are probably the same people that were pissed off that like Starfield had 1,000 and it was really, really blah. You know, like everything was so boring and bland and uninteresting. This time around with this game, they're trying to do something more handcrafted. So they have 5 planets that you go to, similar to like a Jedi Survivor. And they've wanted to create those maps in a typical Ubisoft style, but you know, they are fairly large. There was one article that people posted as a result of some of this, like this one. Some Star Wars Outlaws planets can be crossed in 4 or 5 minutes with a speeder. Let's see, creative director Julian Garrity reiterated the planets Tatooine, Toshara Moon, Akiva, Kijimi, and Cantonica will be around the size of 2 or 3 zones in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and confirmed Toshara is very close in size to Akiva or Tatooine. I think Tatooine might be a little bit larger. When then asked how long it would take protagonist Kay Vess to ride from one end of Toshara to the other side on her speeder, Garrity gave 4 to 5 minutes answer, which is will seemingly also apply to Akiva and Tatooine since they're around the same size as well. And I mean, the speeder, I would actually really be curious how quickly you can ride across maps like San Andreas or you know, Los Santos or something in vehicles in that game. Because like whenever you're on a vehicle, of course, things can go quickly. But with open worlds, it's always about the quality of the content within them. It's not just about scale. Like, and I think Starfield proved that pretty clearly. It's not about how many there are or how big the maps are. It's about what's in them. Because anybody can procedurally generate a 500 square mile fish tank for you to run around in. But if it's not interesting to be within, who cares? Like, it just doesn't matter. What really matters is how you can make it interesting to explore. So I've seen some people freak out about that, and I'm I'm not convinced that's a problem. If anything, it gets me more interested because I'm like, okay, so it's more manageable in terms of scale and scope. We're not trying to make 1,000 planets, you know?
We created with Lucasfilm Games. And once you finish the sort of linear narrative on Toshara, the other planets open up. And there it becomes completely non-linear, and you can choose to tackle those in any order you want.
Exploration of these worlds is highly encouraged, with maps that are not, at least initially, flooded with icons and points of interest, because you're seeing these places from a fresh perspective.
Kay, as a character, hasn't seen the galaxy. So the first time Kay comes to Toshara is the first time you come to Toshara. And it's not an unknown, uncharted place. So you'll have a map of where you can see there's mountains over there and stuff, but discovery is what gives you more information.
You're going to have to take some risks. You're going to have to go to a cantina, and you can eavesdrop, pick up on some conversations that will lead you to another location that reveals a location within the open world that you have to get on your speeder to go and find. There will be a fog of war that you'll be able to clear up, and that's really where your curiosity will open things up even more.
Each of Outlaws' worlds vary in size. Toshara, Massive's newly created moon, is around the same size as the jungle planet of Akiva, but a little smaller than the vast desert of Tatooine.
It was less about how big, but more about how long in terms of traversal. With the speeder, it would be 4 or 5 minutes non-stop, which doesn't sound like a lot, but once you're committed, it's a fairly large amount. You're always going to be distracted. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was one of the games that we were looking at while creating this, you have different zones, so it's 2 or 3 of those together.
And that doesn't even take into account the vast areas of space that surround each planet and serve as...
Which, I mean, you think if each one of these things is 2 to 3 zones in Odyssey, it ends up being about the size of Odyssey, like of the actual like ground, not the oceans, of course, but the actual playable space, which is freakishly huge. Odyssey is massive.
It's entirely different areas of orbital exploration and opportunity. We'll cover that, as well as the starship side of the game in greater depth later on in this month's IGN First.
I said, run.
In terms of mission design, we've seen action ranging from stealth infiltrations, frantic dogfights, high-speed chases, and intense blaster battles, with some quests even evolving to include all these elements at different stages. Star Wars Outlaws is thus perhaps better thought of as a single-player narrative action-adventure in the wrappings of an open world, something more akin to Marvel's Spider-Man than dense RPGs like The Witcher or Ubisoft's recent Assassin's Creed games. Its mixture of popcorn action and blockbuster narrative ambition is a departure from Massive's gear-based experience on The Division. It's a new chapter in the continued evolution of a studio that started life as a real-time strategy developer.
I think if you look at the evolution of open world between Division 1 and Division 2, there's a life, a dynamism, a systemic quality to Division 2 that we didn't have in Division 1. I'm not talking about the presentation, the soft values at all. I'm talking about pure gameplay experience, single player or cooperative. That was very, very important to us to have as a living, breathing element that engages players while they're playing Outlaws.
It's an evolution of what Massive has been doing in their games for years now, keeping worlds feeling bustling and alive even when set against post-apocalyptic backdrops or in the midst of galactic wars.
We, in both Division games, but especially in the second one, developed what we call living world systems. So same thing here. We have systems that make sure that the world is always alive with movement, traffic, speeders zipping around, the Empire patrolling, the syndicates have footholds out there, sometimes more substantial events happen. And it's really up to you if you want to engage or not.
Perhaps Outlaws' most interesting method of breathing life into its open world is its approach to character progression. There's no leveling up or incremental stat boost to drop experience points into. Instead, case ability and equipment are linked to experts, people you'll meet across the galaxy who'll grant you upgrades in exchange for work.
I heard you're the best shot on the planet.
Oh, and you want to be second best.
Which, as far as leveling is concerned, is kind of an interesting way to do it. Instead of just like, okay, you shot 15 stormtroopers, now you get a skill point, throw it somewhere. It actually is tied into the narrative a little bit more closely. Like, you want to get better at gun skills, you need to find a character in the game that is good at using like gunplay skills, and so they'll then give you tasks and missions to level it up and gain that skill. In the same way, like if you want to improve your I don't know, stealth skills, you find somebody that's good at stealth and then they let you unlock those. It's an interesting way of doing it. I can't think of another game that's done it that way, which is impressive because not many games do that, like do something really unique. So I don't know, I'm intrigued.
They are full-on characters. You don't know exactly who they are, what exactly they have to offer you, and how to reach them from the very beginning. So there's this journey of discovery here as well. Intel, clues, okay, I think there's a guy or gal or something that can do good things to my speeder here. Meaning these are really strong incentives for you to move around and journey through the world and expose yourself to other fun things on the way. And once you reach them, there's a character there to interact with and an adventure to go on, because they want instantly just, oh, here you go, right? And then they essentially open up a little regional progression for you where the nature of unlocking those things is also very tangible.
For example, after finding a Jawa by sourcing their location from overheard intel at a cantina, you can complete a mission for them in order to gain a new skill. In this case, it's to venture into a dead Sarlacc to find a pristine tooth from its second mouth, which you can then exchange for a laser turret for Kay's starship, the Trailblazer. It's a smart way of blending gameplay progression with narrative befitting of the Star Wars criminal underbelly.
You can go on a journey with a character, such as an expert who is going to teach Kay a new skill, and you give her a new upgrade, to her blaster. That skill, that upgrade definitely ties into Kay pulling off the heist, but it's also very much its own journey, which is in the Star Wars tradition as well.
Another system aiming to marry gameplay with narrative is how Outlaws tracks Kay's reputation with each of the criminal syndicates. Her bond with each of the Hutts, Pikes, Crimson Dawn, and Ashiga clan will strengthen or weaken depending on your choices in dialogue and mission objectives.
I'm gonna finish it. Shame.
Your reputation moving in the positive direction unlocks a lot of things for you. Everything from actual access to territory that they control, where you might have been able to sneak in otherwise, to landing pads in the open world, discount with traders affiliated with the syndicate, unique, really exotic rewards, etc., etc. But if you really get on their bad side, that's another thing that you will feel dynamically in the game, because they actually send hit squads out for you in the open world.
The reputation system doesn't just sit inside of missions though. Smaller opportunities regularly present themselves to boost your relationships among the syndicates. These might be smaller skirmishes where choosing to get involved can benefit you and the organization you side with, and a strong bond may even help you out with the bigger threat looming over the galaxy.
This is getting bad. Hold tight.
If you, for whatever reason, ended up wanted and you're being chased by Empire and you cross paths with a syndicate that you have really good reputation with at the moment, they might join in and help you out.
Outlaws directly follows the events of The Empire Strikes Back and sees the Imperial forces at the peak of their powers.
What I'm wondering is, like, okay, let's say you're really close with the Pike Syndicate, and then you get a wanted level. And in the map, there's like areas controlled by the Pike Syndicate where like a bunch of their soldiers will hang out. So what if you get a wanted level and you're being chased on like your speeder bike, and then you drive up to the Pike Syndicate base, will you be able to run in and then they start defending you? That's an interesting concept.
In gameplay terms, the Stormtroopers are basically like GTA's police and adopt a similar wanted system. Find yourself in a restricted area or accidentally fire a stray laser bullet at a Stormtrooper and you'll quickly find yourself in hot water. It's by no means a revolutionary system when it comes to open world design, but one that's made all the more exciting thanks to a lick of Imperial black and white paint.
It has a good range of escalation and de-escalation. It's really up to you if you want to try and hide or maybe bribe an Imperial officer that's a bit corrupt in the city somewhere or try to jump to a different space region. But you will feel it, and let's just say there are Death Troopers for this.
Hang on!
Beyond the main missions,
This is a very important question. Balancing quality with quantity. How do you keep it leveled?
expert side missions, and the reputation system at the core of it all, many other snackable activities exist in Outlaws open world. These range from quick contracts such as smuggling and stealing, gambling in Sabak, to playing asteroid-filled arcade shooter games, and betting on Canto Bite's Favia racing. All of these activities bolster your ever-growing supply of credits, which can be used to purchase new customization and gear options for Kay, her pet-like alien companion Nyx, and the Trailblazer. And yet, there's more. Emergent events frequently take place throughout the open world, whether on land or in space.
Every 2-3 minutes, there'll be something that's happening, whether it's an ambush or the Empire arresting some civilians or combat with some criminal syndicates, and it's up to you whether you want to engage or not.
So was
Remember all those videos I've done on like the 40-second rule of open world design, or for Red Dead, it was the 80-second rule. There's so many of these games where you can tell at what point, like, where were they placing content. I even did it for Hogwarts Legacy, and it was much denser. It was like every 15 seconds. But it was different for different tiers of encounters and things that you could find. So it's always fascinating to me because certain games will have very different feels while exploring. Like Breath of the Wild feels very different to explore than Red Dead or than Skyrim or New Vegas or whatever else. And usually that's because of a couple of these very basic design decisions, like how often do you find interesting things? And in something like Star Wars Outlaws, hearing that they're trying to do every couple of minutes, they're doing something when you're out flying around that will pop up to pull your interest. It just reaffirms for me that, okay, they've talked with the rest of the team, like the Odyssey team, they've talked to the AC team, and they're trying to share some of their know-how.
so much to do in Star Wars Outlaws. How does Massive go about avoiding open world bloat? With a near endless galaxy of opportunity, there's the worry that things may spiral,
Professional
feature creep
streamer.
sets in, and everything just gets too big. The studio had a clear plan from the start though, leading with
Wasn't Starfield 2 to 3 minutes? No, Starfield's weird because for Starfield, you'll pull it up, especially after the update that added planets, planet maps. You'll pull up the map, you'll land on a planet, you pop out, and then you see 3 points of interest. So already your attention has been triggered there. And then you pick one of them to run to, because again, there's no like vehicles or anything. So you pick one of them to run to, and then you run for 4 to 8 minutes to get to one, when there might be something of interest there. But then you turn, you see the other point of interest you already saw, so it doesn't really count as something new and interesting. And then you run for 6 to 8 minutes to that one. You take care of it. It might be just a geological formation. It might be a station, like a space station. It might be any number of things. And then you turn to the next point of interest that you saw and you run for 8 minutes to get to that. It is extremely boring because there's not really anything new happening. Occasionally there will be a ship that lands nearby and you can run off and shoot them and deal with that. But it's not really that novel. And I think part of the reason it feels so bad is because, again, all of the points of interest are shown to you right at the outset. You see them, and then for the next 20 minutes, you know exactly where you're going, and you're just running for 6 to 8 minutes to get between those things. And the whole point with most open world games is it's during that travel time that interesting things should be popping up, which is why it's so baffling that for a game like Starfield, you will run for 10 minutes and nothing of interest will happen other than you jumping over some rocks. And it's like, yeah, no wonder it's boring. You're basically allowing people to turn their brains off for 5 to 10 minutes constantly. Like, Starfield's a great TikTok game, you know? I think I'm going to use that term more often now. TikTok games. Those games where you just hold down W and you scroll TikTok while the character's running to the place you need to get to. That's what Starfield is. But with this, we're hearing that the maps are much more dense. They're trying very hard to have interesting things pop up and happen constantly. Those are the hallmarks of good open world design. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, sure, but that's what it takes to keep people engaged when you're playing an open world video game.
Variety over size, quality over quantity, if you will.
We don't want things to be just big for big sake. We need it to be contained.
Giggity.
Always fun, always proposing different activities.
It's about calibrating size to substance. When you see something that breaks pattern, that stands out for that reason, you go there and look, there's something there to do, and that repeats frequently enough, and that the quests, the bespoke kind of content of the game makes use of it, so that it doesn't feel like a separate experience, but it's all one.
Of course, no matter how much there will be to do in Outlaws, one thing that can be expected is a healthy helping of nods to the larger Star Wars galaxy. Lando is set to make an appearance, and we've already seen a glimpse of Han Solo and Carbonite, but it sounds like they might just be the tip of the iceberg.
There's Easter eggs, there's characters that you'll meet along the way across the main quests and across, whether it's the experts or the wider stories you're going to stumble across. August 30th is a really great date. I recommend bookmarking it in your calendar.
August 30 is right around the corner. A short wait for many players for whom an open world game set in a galaxy far, far away has been a long-held dream. I could feel a similar passion for Star Wars coming out of each person I spoke to at Massive, and for them, I can't help but get the sense that that dream is a shared one. Making open world games is tough, and bringing open world to Star Wars may well bring an extra level of difficulty, but for Garrity and the team, it's been a challenge worth taking on.
I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm getting to that point where I think I can count the number of games I can do till I'm put out to pasture on one hand, and it becomes more and more important to me to choose what I do, because it's really important for me to do quality work with people that I love working with. And Star Wars is definitely bucket lists.
So, where do we go next?
Anywhere we want.
We'll have more exclusive looks at Star Wars Outlaws for you throughout July, and for everything else, stick with IGN.
Where do we go? Anywhere we want. That's not a useful answer. We're trying to go places. God damn it. I think it looks solid. What I've played, I've enjoyed. If anything, I don't know if this will come as a surprise to anybody, but if anything, I am more currently intrigued by Star Wars Outlaws than even what I've seen with like Assassin's Creed Shadows. Like AC Shadows seems to just be really safe and solid. It's like they're not really doing anything that crazy other than the weather system that we haven't seen much about. But I just haven't seen anything that's like really exciting about that. But Star Wars Outlaws actually looks like they've been cooking. I heard somebody use this comparison. They said they're like, Star Wars Outlaws looks like they've been cooking. AC Shadows looks like they've been microwaving. And I was like, yeah, that's actually, as of right now, I get that. I think, for one, to be clear, AC Shadows, it's like 6 months out, okay? They have plenty of time to show more, and that's what they're going to do. Like, they're going to do a lot more trailer drops, gameplay drops. Like, they've only shown a little sliver at this point, whereas Star Wars Outlaws is in the home stretch, and it's starting to ramp up its marketing cycle. So they're going to be advertising it a lot, and that's why we're seeing so much of it. So I fully expect that AC Shadows will start to look a lot better as time goes by, and as we start to see more of the cool stuff that they have hopefully been working on. But I think AC Shadows, or rather Star Wars Outlaws, is looking really, really, really nice. Does that mean Black Myth Wukong is air frying? Yeah. Well, actually, no, it's been smoking, because it's been a long time coming. We've seen that game for years and years. So it's like it's on a Traeger, it's like on a Traeger, slowly smoking at like 225 until the meat just falls off the bone. I'm realizing I'm just hungry right now. that's what's happening right now.
He took my thing.